G'day folks, welcome back to the Birders Guide for another fortnight. Great to be chatting with you. The conversation we're going to have today is a little bit different. We really don't talk about birds at all, apart from right at the start and right at the end. It sort of focuses more on mammals, but the overall topic, feral cats, very relevant to birding and birds. So I hope you still enjoy it. I found it very interesting. Before we get into that, let me tell you a little bit about my birding. Haven't done any. There was one bit of birding that I was hoping to do, which was Paul Taylor, who some of you might know. He's sort of the guru of birds out this way, and he was around Port Clinton Conservation Park. I don't know if he was actually in the conservation park, but that area earlier this week, and found some little terns and a broad-billed sandpiper, which are very uncommon / rare in this part of the world. So I was hoping to get out there, but other stuff happened. So maybe next week, keen to go and see if they're still hanging around. Bit of a trek to get into where he found them. So we'll see how we go. The other reason that I haven't been out birding is I inherited a boat from my grandfather when he passed away early last year, I want to say. So that's like a old 19-foot fiberglass Swift craft. So I have been renovating that, making it look pretty, making sure it all works as it's supposed to. So I'm hoping to finish that today, and using that not only for fishing, which I enjoy, but also exploring some islands off the coast of South Australia. So I'd really quite like to go and explore Althorpe Island one day. I know that off of Ceduna, there's been some bridal terns seen and other bits and pieces, and I'm not opposed to a bit of a road trip. So if anyone's keen, let me know. We'll go birding. Anyway, that's all from me. Hope you enjoy this conversation. Like I said, I'm not going to put something at the end. So join in another fortnight's time for someone else. Until then, happy birding. So Hugh, welcome to the Birders Guide. It's great to have you on the show.
Oh, thank you.
Now, we're going to chat mostly about cats, feral cats primarily, but I'm just interested, before we get onto that, to hear a little bit about yourself. How did you, well, yeah. Do you want to give us a 2-minute snapshot of yourself?
Sure. Yeah. Well, when I was pretty young, I was a bit of a birder, and grew up in most of my high school, and that was all in Melbourne. And just really wanted to get out bush. Really wanted to, spend most of the time doing conservation kind of work. And then after school, was able to get up to Albury, Wodonga, Charles Sturt there, and study, do my degree there, and then kind of was looking around for doing a bunch of bits of work all over the area, looking around for what I thought was probably the biggest question coming up. And I just felt it, just cats. And I sort of, when you're seeing all these good patches of bush and just not many animals responding. And I was pretty convinced that cats and foxes were probably one of the major threats at that stage. And so looked to try and research them however I could. And at the same time, a awesome PhD opportunity came up in the Kimberley looking at cats and fire. So I jumped onto that, had a wonderful time with that. And now these days I'm living in Roxby Downs. My wife runs a conservation reserve out here, and I just do bits and pieces of other little work while looking after the kids. And here we are.
Yeah, nice. Has all your research been in cats from, like, I assume you didn't go straight from high school to PhD, and you did some other stuff in between there?
Yeah. So I was doing a lot of wildlife research on farms. So we'd work for a small consultant. We do a lot of work with land care, and we do bird watching in people's farms, and work out, understand about environmental water, how they're delivering, conservation's help by environmental waters. It was one bunch of wonderful stuff around the Murray River there, and then got into cats full time pretty much after that, and ever since then, just done cats of all different forms. But,
Yeah, nice. How did you get into birding? What was your grandfather, father, mother? How did you fall into birding to start with?
Pretty much when we were hiking, as my parents before us were big avid hikers, and then when we came along, they had to slow down a lot, and their walking pace was dramatically reduced. And my mum put it as, she got into birding, it's something to do while just
waiting for her kids to catch up.
Yeah, we got it together again, and just young age that got totally obsessed with it, as little kids often do with things. And then high school years, got into computer games instead. Then once sort of hit high school finished, and just remembered how much fun it was birding, and got back into it again. And been doing his career ever since.
Yeah, nice. But when you moved up to the Kimberley to do your PhD research up there, had you been up to that part of the world before?
Yeah. I was spent a lot of my younger years up there. My dad did his PhD many years ago up there as well, and it was kind of, when I was growing up, was a bit of a daydream to live up there, and so it was just absolutely perfect PhD to sort of it was a perfect PhD for me at the right time.
Yeah. What was last question before we start chatting about cats, what was your dad's PhD on?
Aboriginal languages of the particularly almost the same kind of area where I ended up doing a PhD as well. But he studied a lot of languages along the Fitzroy River and closer to Broome. Yeah, nice. And did some of the early work documenting some of those languages.
Yeah, sweet. That's cool. How long ago was that?
Oh, the 80s and 90s. I barely remember any of it. It was kind of sad living in the Kimberley and knowing you've been to all these cool places and just barely remembering any of it. So we went a few times, growing up as well, returned there, but that was pretty much coming new in many regards.
Yeah, sweet. So, cats. Has your research always been just on feral cats? Have you done any? I assume it has been, but have you done any research on, domestic cats?
No, it's all been on feral cats, and I guess the main thing I've always been interested with cats is I sort of believe that cats are, and I'm straying away from my data, this is just an overarching opinion of mine, is that cats are a bit more symptomatic than they are as a cause. So I think it's pretty clear to say that foxes just came to Australia and destroyed. Yeah, they were basically a wildfire in of themselves. Feral cats, although they, a few species, the second cats hit Australia, they died. They're very vulnerable, like stick nest rats and things like that. Pretty instantaneous. But most other species coexisted with cats for a long time. Tasmania has had cats for forever, and it's only been in recent years that cats appear to be actually causing any damage in Tasmania. And in Tasmania, it seems to be linked to the devil facial tumour. So as the devils go down, the cat's niche opens up, and then cats are able to cause damage. And Kakadu in the 80s had as good a mammal fauna as any cat-free island or predator reserve. The Kakadu's been incredible mammals, and then they just decline. Now, it's not exactly 100% due to cats, but it seems like cats are part of the equation anyway. And so there's all these areas in Australia where cats and native wildlife are coexisting pretty happily, and then suddenly something changes and they're terrible. And so I've been trying to look into that in different forms. So in the Kimberley particularly, it was a great opportunity because the fire regime's changed immensely in the last 50 years. And are cats some kind of like not necessarily a threat in themselves? They came to the Kimberley, did a lot of damage because they've been in the Kimberley forever, or not forever, like 100 years or so. Been there for ages, not seemingly huge amount of damage, and then suddenly things take a terrible turn.
That's interesting. I think I got a few questions further down the line that will play into. History-wise, you're talking about when cats, first arrived. When did cats originally get to Australia, and how did they get here? I assume they just came over as pets with the English?
Partially pets, but more for the same. Almost, they were kept over for the same reason that they're doing the damage. They're good rat control, and so all the ships had cats. You know, a lot of people when they set their grain, their silos, or just have them around the house to protect their crops from rats. They were kind of brought over for the very reason, mostly very reason they end up causing so much damage. And then, of course, the native rats that don't have adaptation to them just got absolutely destroyed.
Yeah,
that's
yeah, for sure.
And it probably and so early 1800s they came around with the first settlement, and it appears that there was I think latest genetic evidence suggests there's sort of two waves, one that originated around Melbourne and Sydney, one that originated Perth. Those two genetic strains essentially came, they spread across Australia, and there's now like a Perth Southwest Australian strain and then the rest of Australian strain. But I don't think there's very good evidence that they were here with the Dutch. That it's still possible, but most when there was someone who did a wonderful paper a while ago. He documented all the early explorer and early settler records he could of when they noticed cats, what type of cats they noticed, and it's a pretty clear picture he paints. You watch the spread across Australia, and there's certain desert areas where the cats beat the explorers, but they were still 50 years later, 100 years after. Cats already established.
So I don't. I'll admit that I don't really know anything about domestic and feral cats. Are all the feral cats in Australia one species? Are all domestic cats one species and they just look different? I don't know anything about cats.
To my knowledge, they're all with the same species. To my knowledge, some of those weird breeds, like you get these bobtails, and I know there's a jungle cat in a bush once I saw, which was a bobtail and was bigger. There might be, if there are other species or breeds that are so outlandish that they would be classed as different species. They're not. They haven't ecologically taken over. So ecologically, there's like one species. The feral cat across Australia, and it's virtually identical to most of the pet cats, except I think they're kind of. My guess is they operate the same as like wild dogs and dingoes do, where they're sort of technically the same species in a way. But if any wild dog strays out into dingo territory, a dingo's just going to kill it. Like a dingo might be more of a social construct than is a genetic construct, but that social construct is solid. And so we're at recovery. We've for 30 years there's been a steady amount of cats being controlled along the perimeter of that fenced reserve. Since I've been here, we've probably controlled like 500 cats, and we also help council and town with a lot of their cat control as well. I'm going to say, on the top of my head, maybe 5% of cats caught in town or the nearby mine site end up being someone's pet, and we have to send to council. No cat we've ever caught 30 kilometres away at our recovery has been a pet cat. No tattoos, no sign. They're just pure tabby feral cats. I just don't think that life in a home translates to life in the wild for a feral cat. It's tough.
I was Googling this last night, and I did have an idea of this, but Google says that there's between about 2 and 6 million feral cats in Australia. I'm just wondering, do you know how that number is calculated? Like, who decides that number? And even that number itself, between 2 and 6 million, that's a very wide spread of numbers.
Well, partially, so I was involved in the paper that compiled that. It's a hodgepodge. It is, I think it's around 90 different studies of all different types, spotlighting, general estimates, density estimates from remote cameras. In some cases, they'll be sort of like they have an area where they know, like an island, they'd remove 100 cats, and then the activity of cats would drop by a certain amount, so then backwards infer density. And the error, that difference between 2 and 6 million, that's more associated with, in a dry year, the estimate's around about 2 million. In a wet year, the estimate, like a boom year, the estimate's around 6 million.
Rightio.
Within each of those two things, there's even more error. So it can be like between 1 million and almost 15 million is the error within those estimates. They're messy, but it's a ballpark figure, because for a while there, everyone was saying 20 million cats in Australia. And it's one of those citations that gave them a life of its own, where everyone would reference someone else who said it, and they would reference someone else who said it. And it was almost, the citation almost didn't exist. It was just made up at a conference or something. And it had just had this life of its own. It was in the media, it was everywhere. And it was kind of embarrassing for people after a while when they realized that they'd all been circular referencing. It happens all the time. You just get a great figure like that sounds right, may intuitively feel right, and so it just gets ends up having a life of its own. So this paper was in large measure attempting to address that. So it's messy, it's huge amounts of error associated with it, but it's at least a half decent ballpark. Is it 100 million? Is it a couple 100,000? This is actually just good. Well, we can say it's a couple of million. So.
When did you work on that paper? So my question is, did your PhD research change the way you think about that number, or did it sort of correlate alongside of it, or did it not really have anything to do with it at all?
Oh, it correlated. I think, so I contributed some of the data for that. I wasn't really involved with the overall writing of that paper.
Okay.
Just more, assisting, bulking out. I contributed a lot of density estimates. In some regards, I'm always been conflicted about that paper in the sense that it was great. I think it was really important. It was an excellent at what it set out to do, as in what's a ballpark of cats in Australia. But it's not also, because I was back to what I was saying earlier about cats being a bit more symptomatic than a cause at times. In some, and that paper really helped galvanize public opinion. It helped articulate the problem with feral cats. And then you can use that estimate to back end how many animals are killed, how many birds are killed in Australia every year, how many small mammals. And that paper was almost like a Rosetta Stone for all these other overarching papers of cat impacts across Australia.
Yeah.
But to me, it doesn't capture the core issue of feral cats, because I always joke in a way that you can write this, like that paper was used to write papers, for example, it's about, about 270 million birds estimated to be killed in Australia every year based on that research. And it sort of sounds terrifying. And then I always kind of joke in my head that, echidnas are responsible for probably 1 billion ant deaths every year. It kind of, everything kills stuff. All predators kill things. It's more about whether that number is greater than the amount that are bred every year. And so for the vast majority of birds in Australia that are killed by cats, it's like they just breed more than cats kill. So, budgies aren't at risk anytime soon, and budgies often turn up in the stomach. Quail, quail are probably a cat favourite prey, but most quail are doing fine. Or at least if they're not doing fine, they're not primarily threatened by cats.
Yeah.
But then again, you do get species. There's a whole bunch of species that are killed at a rate greater than they can breed. And so, the actual pure death toll of cats is less important than the ecological position that cats have and whether they have an unfair advantage over the native predators or something like that.
Yeah. So I have a question here that I want to ask you, which is, it's going to take me a little while to ask, but I want to jump ahead just on what you've asked then, what you said, and say, is eradicating cats actually a good idea? So this is, I know everyone listening is going to be like, what a stupid question. My question is, because cats have been around for so long and they have they actually do have a big, they play a big part in the environment. If we did eradicate all of the cats in Australia, if that was possible, would that have unintended negative consequences, or would everything just go back to the way it was and everything would just flourish as per usual?
I
your
should
opinion?
mention, I've got many thoughts on this topic. I'm probably leaving data for a bit of this, what I'm going to say here. Like, I've just got my own 2 cents on the matter.
Yeah.
Also, actually, before I say that though, I'll just say Arid Recovery, where my wife works now at in Central Australia, is almost a good example of what happens when you take away the cats. So a fence is put up, all the cats are removed, native animals reintroduced, and they flourish. They go up. They're particularly one species, the burrowing bettong, critically endangered, and it's just the graph just goes up and 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 up to the point that they're almost as bad as calicivirus rabbits. They always had predators. Suddenly they don't. Now they were causing almost as much damage as overabundant rabbits, easily as much damage as overabundant kangaroos. They were having their own impacts. Stick-nest rats started declining, probably due to a loss of core food resources that the bettong started to eat. And it was just most animals. Ecosystems need predators. Predators have been part of all ecosystems. I think a lot of the overabundant kangaroos we're seeing now is just a function of not as much predators as they're just used to having. I think any animal, if it is given a free pass, becomes overabundant. So cats have a key role cats are predators, and predators are important in the ecosystem. Take out a predator, problems.
What was the predator that cats replaced though? Because, I mean, if you use bettongs, for example, when the Europeans first arrived in Australia, it wasn't like there was, hundreds of millions of burrowing bettongs around the place. So something was obviously keeping, the dingoes and snakes and all this sort of stuff. So a roundabout way to get to my question, at arid lands, does the fence that keeps out the cats also keep out the natural predators?
Yes. So dingoes particularly. Quolls, but the main thing that cats replaced were quolls. The quolls had pretty much the niche of cats. Before they were introduced.
Do cats kill quolls?
They do.
You don't see many quolls around.
Yeah, they also were one of, especially the western quoll and desert regions, were just one of the many species that declined when cats and foxes came through.
Yeah.
There's a lot of the places where, I was saying earlier, there's all these places where cats are there and native wildlife still coexist. One of the common threads to those places is good populations of quolls. So Tasmania, Tasmania had the Tasmanian devil and the quoll. Yeah. A lot of the northern, Northern Australia had northern quolls for most of it. The New England tablelands, which is for some reason incredible for mammals, it just really has survived the mammal onslaught better than elsewhere. It's really good quolls. So I'm not saying it's causational. I think you have an ecosystem with all different native ecosystem with all different components working together. And it's not like the quolls are keeping the cats out per se. It's just like a good ecosystem is quolls. And then cats come along, they probably kill all the quolls, or something gets out of balance, the quolls then leave.
Yeah.
But the other predator, of course, was Indigenous Australians too, who would have been just as much of a predator for small mammals as kangaroo. Like they were a major part of the culture and diet of everyone out here. I think they probably were just having just as much impact on a lot of these populations as quolls were. But they were predators kept things in balance before.
No, you're right.
Yeah, and so I think first of all, I think that apart from if you use some kind of one of those new fancy genetic techniques of killing all cats, which feel just a little bit too science fiction and scary for my liking, but I don't know, maybe it'll happen one day. I think they're talking about this thing where they're I think they call it, it's CRISPR. It's an acronym for something where you can put these genes in a population which will make their only breed males, and so over time they will. That's the only feasible option I've ever heard for actually eradicating cats from Australia.
Yeah.
Even eradicating cats from large areas like Kangaroo Island are huge, immensely costly. huge exercises. It's got mainland Australia, unless you're using some weird genetic tool, it's not going to happen. So I don't. But even then, but just back to what you're saying, though, even if you could eradicate them, I certainly you only want to do it in conjunction with a whole heap of other stuff, because if you just suddenly took away cats from Australia now, you'd have a massive boom in rats, rabbits, and everything, all the other feral species. And you're probably making great food source for foxes to take over. And foxes, whereas cats, there's a bit of a grey area. Cats can coexist with a lot of native species. Foxes, not really. Foxes are just so destructive that I reckon if you kill the cats, it just make more of an opportunity for foxes in some regard. Unless an ecosystem is built together like bricks, creating a larger structure, one thing gets out of way. You just take away one thing, it's just an opportunity for something else.
So can you expand on what you mean by foxes are more destructive than cats? Because I would have thought, and I will assume that a lot of people listening to this will have put it the other way around. Foxes just kill to eat, cats kill, and this is going to come up later. Cats just kill, eat, not eat. So my opinion personally is that cats would have been a bigger danger than foxes.
Yeah, this is where I'm getting a bit biased. My new, I'm getting into mammals more than birds these days, and so partially I'm a little bit biased there. Now I'm thinking that so foxes, and actually, a lot of those areas I was mentioning where the cats are still doing okay, native wildlife.
Yep.
A lot of those are also defined by not having many foxes. So southwestern WA, like the Dryandra woodlands, that's where the 1080 gastrolobium plant is. Foxes had cats too, but foxes had a very hard time taking over. I'm actually not as sure about that as I probably sounded just then. Because foxes have weaknesses as well as strengths. I reckon if you had 10 foxes and 10 cats... actually, sorry, just one bit of data I could use is that I recovering one of the extra paddocks that was... It's not designed to be completely feral-free, but there's coexist. It's for a whole different research that cats have been there for a while. You're having impacts on native animals, but not huge amounts. But then a fox or two gets in, they just kill an insane amount of bedongs every day.
Yeah.
I reckon personally, and once again, this has never been scientifically tested, but I'll bet that if you had 10 foxes and 10 cats, you put them into an island, foxes would cause more damage than the cats.
Okay.
However, foxes have a bunch more weaknesses that cats don't have. They're very they can't specialize on prey, I don't think, to the same extent that a cat does. I think they're high octane. They breed heavily, but they also need a lot of resources to survive. So I think cats are just better at handling droughts, going through the tough times, working out, there's some bird nests in this tree. So if I wait at the bottom of that tree, I might see, cats can work out really clever little techniques for hunting. Foxes just high octane, go around, find what they can. They can't find what they can. They don't, breed as much. And so I'm not really sure if, probably a better way to put it is not necessarily that foxes are probably worse than cats. If you took away all the cats, foxes would fill the void. The cats, there'd just be more food. Foxes, they'd take over. And I'm not... and I check out, the reverse happens in a lot of fox control operations where foxes will be the dominant predator in a landscape. Foxes can be controlled. That's one, 1080 is very effective on them. So a lot of parks before, had successful successful fox control operations, and then the cats slowly take over. And so the fox control is not really reducing predation as it's swapping predation. And I think that's one thing I always consider with cat control. You'll make it momentarily. I often feel like a bit of a bushfire analogy in my head that the cats are grazing all the small mammals down, and they might graze into the ground. But if you take them away, they start to build up again. But that is a food source. That is like a fuel source that another predator will come in and take advantage of if no one else is there. I'd like to see, dingoes are something that can take over, and also quolls. And so I reckon, I'm sort of hoping one day that cat control can be very easily incorporated with quoll reintroductions, like they're doing in the Flinders Ranges to wonderful success.
Yeah.
And I'm not entirely sure whether the quolls would ever keep cats at bay by themselves, but something has to fill the void that cats. If you get rid of cats, something has to fill the void.
Yeah.
And the other thing is arid recovery now. They've put quolls into arid recovery now too, as that kind of to just keep things in balance.
Yeah. Just to expand on something you just said, then I don't know anything about it, but do you know how successful the Flinders Ranges quoll reintroduction is going or has been?
Yeah. Well, so I'm not involved in it.
Just lost a painting there. That's right. I had a big map on the back of on the wall behind me, which fell down this morning. So there you go. That's all right.
Sorry. Yeah, Flinders Range. So I'm not. What I understand, insanely successful. So
sweet.
The population doing well. They're doing regularly cat control that is appearing to still continually work.
Mm-hmm.
The quolls are expanding in range, and really, and it's been surviving for a couple of, the population is doing well for a couple of years.
Yeah.
Most reintroductions of things like quolls and small native animals like this outside of a fence, they just get decimated. They just, cats will pick them off in, a couple of months. Any reintroduction that has multiple generations, I see has at least a temporary success. It's incredible.
Yeah.
But it's a wonderful project they've done. And just that excellent commitment to ongoing control work as well is, I think, part of the reason why it's been really successful.
Yeah, nice. I got one other question that I might ask now, maybe. I don't know if you're involved in this. I don't remember if it was even an arid lands thing or another thing. It's everyone that I've spoke to about it. It's a bit controversial, but I didn't read a paper on it, but it was an article about some research being done where they are essentially using, might be bettongs maybe, and putting them with cats. And you just reminded me when you said that you had an enclosure that's not 100% cat proof, essentially to try and selectively breed animals that are better at escaping from cats and then using them to breed more, I guess. Do you know the thing that I'm talking about?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you're totally right. That is done at arid recovery. Catherine Mosby and is one of the bigger conservationists in the arid lands, has been running that for many years now. And
the people that I've spoken to are sort of half on the fence of that's a good idea, let's try that out, and half why are we purposefully killing off native animals, feeding them to cats essentially. Can you give us a quick background on what that study is and perhaps if it's having any success that it was hoping to have?
So the background of the study was because I think, as I mentioned earlier, with translocations, just get decimated. You try and you so many times people have controlled cats in an area and foxes. They think they've got them down. They'll get some native animals to bring back, and then they just progressively watch as they just get picked off and killed over the next couple of months. It's been going on for ages, and I mean the number of failed translocations of small things that are threatened by cats is just heartbreaking. And a big part of it is because you have it in Australia now with a lot of the conservation is revolving around fenced reserves or islands. So, barring bettongs, a whole heap of other native wildlife survive cats on islands, or they survive on fenced reserves where there's zero cats.
Yeah.
So you have a thing where there's too many cats outside a fence, zero cats inside a fence, and there is an insanely fast behavioral pressure on animals that if you don't have predators, you want to be as aggressive and as fearless as possible, because basically spending your time worrying about predators is a silly way of competing with other animals for food. It only makes sense if there are actually predators.
Mm-hmm.
If you're a bettong and you're looking around, spending about half an hour every night before you leave your burrow, just double checking there's nothing around, done a huge amounts of effort. When you're eating, you're looking around, double checking. That's a huge part of your life that is not eating, not getting the best food, not getting the best resources, the best burrows. If you relax predation pressure, it is insanely fast how many animals, the pressure suddenly become, you'll only be a cool bettong if you don't care. So it happens really, really fast. And then some of these islands have been predator free for like 10,000 years. And in one case in Northern Australia, it took 10 generations for quolls to forget. Put onto an island, in 10 generations, they've forgotten about a lot of predators. They just don't care anymore, because if things aren't real, they don't need to be real. And there's basically the animals in a population who don't care about predators will get so many more benefits. It's like, I mean, just imagine, it wouldn't be too different to having a company that just didn't have to abide by any, rules and regulations and legislation. It'd make an immense amount of profit, and then, but it only makes sense to do that in certain. Oh well, sorry, I'll end the analogy there, but so then we're having all these situations where predators animals from fenced reserves, no predators, are put into places with predators. Even though the density of predators seems to be reduced, they just still get picked off like flies. And whole heap of things have been trialled for other ways to try and train predation, train fear. You either have to do an insane, highly involved process in like captive breeding, where you falsify, pretend birds flying over or pretend cats jumping out and lunging at them and injuring them and things like that, which doesn't really often ring true to an animal's life experience. It doesn't. You end up if you're micromanaging to that level, you're kind of not really training animals to be real anymore. And then, in an ideal world, you'd have a translocation would be from one population which has cats but are still surviving to an area where they don't have cats. Where they haven't survived, there's still cats, the threats have been managed. And you remove the behavioral problems out of the equation. And so that's what at our recovery, that research that was being conducted, that's what it's aiming to do. It's aiming to create a source where animals know what they're getting in for. That at least some of the, a lot of those bettongs have been chased by a cat before and survived, and know they're dangerous. That they're not. That they at least know, spend a bit of your night looking for predators. Don't just go out there and eat and not giving a care in the world, because bettongs at our recovery were becoming away from the cats, weren't becoming afraid of anything. They just walk up to anything. People would walk around. You often just hop up to you and just make a whole bit of noise, jump around at your feet, and you just think to yourself, hey, cat food. That makes sense here, but a cat's just going to pick them off. And so I think that that's where that research really came from. And it's had a bit of success. I mean, it hasn't been huge success, but anything that works on sort of an ecological time frame is going to be slow. And so they've recorded behavioural changes in these bettongs. They've recorded slightly better predation awareness. Whether it's enough to mean that you could then reintroduce bettongs and they'd be fine is a different question. That will be hopefully looked into in the next 10 years with that research. But that's where it came from. It's a tough one. But not doing something like that is just you're just making meat for food for cats, unless you have other situations to deal with the fact that these these native animals haven't lived the good life on these islands and these fence reserves for so long. They just don't know what to do when they have to face a real predator.
Sure. So I want to get back to my questions, I think probably the last 4 or 5 questions we've talked about have just been not what we were going to talk about. So back to what we were discussing before. And you said earlier, and I agree, that it's not necessarily the number of cats in Australia that's the issue. That's not what people care about. It's how many animals they kill. That's the actual crux of the matter. So I did some Googling yesterday. So I read through your paper, your PhD paper, and I'm going to put a link up. I'm going to put a link up on the show notes to where I found it. If people want to read it, it's, I don't know how big it is, 140 pages maybe, but it's really interesting. And so if people are reading it or have read it, there's a bit on page, this is going to take me a little bit of time to extrapolate, but I'm going to do my best so that people can understand who are just listening. On page 113, your research found that the cats that you studied, and we'll talk about how you did that in a second, the cats that you studied averaged 7 successful kills each day. And you had a density ratio of 0.17 cats per square kilometers. Your research area was 4,680 square kilometers. So what that equals from your research was 1.2 animals killed per square kilometer per night. If we expand that out to cover Australia, because your research also says that the Kimberley has a very, correct me if I'm wrong here, but a fairly low cat density. And the terrain is not always easy hunting ground. Like, it's not just flat grassland. There's rocks and hills and gullies and all that sort of stuff. So if we expand that out to 1.2 animals per kill, 1.2 animals per night over 365 nights is 438 per kilometer per year. Expand that by 7.5 million square kilometers of Australia, and you've got an average of 3.3 billion animals each year, which definitely falls within, it might even be, I can't remember the number, but definitely falls within what was previously expected to be that number. And that surprises me, because I looked at that number, which was in the billions. I'm like, I just don't see how that's like sustainable. I know Australia is a big place, but 1 billion is a big number, and to have multiple billions each year. So what was I going to say with that? Now I forgot what my train of thought was. Anyway, I'll just ask, how did you like? Nah, I've totally lost my train of thought. Do you have anything to say about that?
Yeah, sure. Well, I think this is where probably one of my bigger opinions on cats. Extrapolating out, it becomes very, very difficult, even at a small distance. So one of the big other findings I had with my PhD, which one of the key findings was that cats love fire. They will spend a lot of time in fires and hunt a lot in fire scars. Okay. One of the other findings I had was that cats hate fire scars. They don't go anywhere near them. It's their worst habitat. And the difference between the two was, if the area has been well managed and there's a bunch of small mammals have returned, and there's lots of grassland, lots of unburned habitat, all the small mammals have come back, and then there's a fire, cats will take advantage of that and they'll descend en masse to those fires.
Yeah.
If the fires have been so frequent and the grazing so intense, and for whatever reason there's hardly any small mammals there, and you have grass build up, and then there's a fire, that fire doesn't mean anything, because there's no small mammals to uncover. And so from my core area that I was doing my research, I uncovered this incredible selection for fire scars. Just 50 k's away, cats weren't doing the same thing at all. It was suddenly different. Cats hated fire scars. And so even extrapolating over 50 kilometers would have been flawed. I'm really glad I got those cats outside those areas, because otherwise I would have come away with a lot more confident with my my things.
Yeah.
And so then getting back to the number of the kill rate, as long as you have good unburnt patches of land in a mosaic that are sort of managed in the way that the Australian Wildlife Conservancy, where I was based at, they have a excellent land management program in that area. And it was, I'd say probably quite simply, it was enabling more native wildlife to breed than the cats were able to kill.
Okay.
And so then the kill rate doesn't matter. Like, in fact, the kill rate's probably higher where there's lots of small mammals, because there's more, they're just killing more, whereas it's harder to find prey where everything's already all gone.
Yeah.
So I think the main thing with the number of animals killed per year is, are the things being killed able to replenish their losses? So, and that's where a lot of the what's a good example? Sort of, you get some of these larger native wildlife that have very low breeding rates. I mean, even bilbies, probably at best, can probably breed 3 babies a year. Rabbits that have coexisted with cats, that have evolved with them, know what to do. They can breed like 50, 100. They just know that. I think a lot of these animals just know the best way to handle cats and foxes and that is just numbers. Just make it a numbers game. It can't kill us all. There's a lot of native wildlife. They try and, they've gone from a more I guess you say conservative, don't use too many resources, just breed a few, do it right, train them, a very lower thing. And so I think in some cases, if a cat's kill 100 bilbies a year, that's terrible. It's probably more than bilbies can replenish. Whereas if they kill, 6 billion hass mice every year, I'd kind of be thinking, yeah, great, go for it. At least do something while you're there. That's where I think kill numbers are a bit deceptive and don't tell the whole story. And also, a lot of the wildlife that cats eat, they're eating the abundant things. So they're eating frogs, of which there are, most frogs are easily breeding as many as cats are killing. A lot of reptiles don't seem to be affected by cat predation, no matter how high the population of cats get. But then again, you get some reptiles that are, that are declining with cats, like great desert skink, which just have a very slow breeding rate. And so it's the mismatch between the killing and the breeding rate that's the issue, not so much the pure kill rate. Yeah. And if you have a high kill rate in a high productivity, well-managed conservation reserve, it doesn't matter that much.
Yeah. So how did you, I can't remember if I've asked you this question or not. What was your PhD actually on? So, I mean, I know the answer to this, but for those listening, what was your PhD actually on, and how did you go about that?
Yeah, so my main question was, are cats interacting with fires to cause more damage to native wildlife? Are they sort of working together? And so I was based in the Central Kimberley in a conservation reserve up there, managed by the Australian Wildlife Conservancy. And we had a big the main way to do it was catching cats and putting collars on them. And the collars would either have a video camera, so we'd record their kill rate, or they'd have a GPS, so we'd record their movements. Yeah. And progressively over a couple of years, we just got a whole heap of cats in the area. We were able to get a whole heap of cats with GPS collars with fires around them, without fires nearby, whole heap of view. And we'd recorded them, in many cases, going to crazy lengths to hunt fire scars. So one of the very first cats I caught, we sort of arrived there. We caught this cat, put a collar on it. I was tracking it every couple of days. And then I had to stop because there was a major fire on about 10 kilometres away that everyone at the reserve where I was working had to put down their tools and just go help fight this fire for a while. And this was in the late in the year. It was a pretty intense fire. Eventually, 2 weeks after that, come back, we have our rest, and I go try and track my cat, and it's gone. it was routinely in the same spot, and suddenly it's just gone. And so I was feeling a bit despondent that I finally caught a cat, and then got a GPS on it, and couldn't find it again.
Yeah.
And a couple of weeks later, I just went back to do another radio track, and it was back again. So all right, cool. Went and caught the cat, and it was all linked. The cat had done this. We'd caught it, and then he'd gone to hunt in the very fire that we would help put out. This big, long cross-country journey, go hunt that fire scar. And it happened again and again. Cats would do these big, long journeys, hunt these fire scars, come back home. And then there was a lot of other research that was done at the time, particularly looking at small mammal rates across the area. There was a lot of research. They'd done radio collared a whole bunch of native wildlife to see, their mortality rates before and after fire and that. Yep. And it was all telling a pretty consistent story that when you have a fire, predation rates massively increase. And it's probably not just cats. A whole heap of animals take advantage of the fire scars. But cats were just able to just wherever there's a weakness in the landscape, where there's small mammals are running around without cover, cats would just descend upon it and just clean everything up in a very short amount of time, just a matter of months.
How do you catch cats? They're generally hard to find.
Up there we tried two different methods. We just trapped. Trapping's very, especially when there's low density of cats. It's just like you can go for one cat went for 2 weeks without catching anything. You start, and it's not very fun either. Like you're catching on targets every now and again, and and it's also that if a cat walks into a trap early in the night, it's been instead 12 hours just sitting there doing nothing. And so a much better way for us up there catching cats was AWC invested in a cat chasing dog program. So we had a couple of dogs that were unmuzzled and not. They wanted to kill the cats, but they couldn't. We'd spotlight around at night, see a cat. The dogs would then get the dogs out in the area. Dogs would then chase after them. If everything goes well, they put them up a tree, and we just come along with a dart rifle. Just put a bit of sedative in them, catch the cat, put a collar on them, release them, and then whenever the GPS has run out of battery or you need to get a new video camera on the cat, you just go out there again, radio track where they are, let the dogs put them up a tree, catch them again, swap them out, and go on that way. It was, the dogs were great for catching new cats, but most importantly, they just meant that you could re-catch a cat alive whenever you wanted. And that was just really valuable. And I think in many regards, I for a lot of these animals, and for cats, I think it's often better to have stressful half hour than restricting something's freedom for 24 hours or something like that, or 24 hours. So dogs are just very effective at catching them.
Do you know, or how fast so this is backtracking a little bit. So you're saying that for native animals and prey, you want them to essentially be able to breed faster than cats can kill them. How fast do cats breed in the wild generally? Do we know that answer?
Not really. There's so much variation. I think it's a really important thing to study in the future. This is just anecdotally, like from the cats I had out in the Kimberley, there appeared to be an extremely low breeding rate.
Okay.
Whenever I'd catch a cat, and it was like a kitten, and I put a collar on it, just a little VHF to see if it survived or not.
Yep.
The mortality of kittens there was huge, just dingoes, and
there
were the females breeding. I'd be lucky to ever have like 1 or 2 kittens a year, but that's a very small sample size, so I don't want to extrapolate too much. This is just my perception. Like anecdotally, it appeared to me that breeding was really, really low, and the density was low. And I have a strong feeling that cat breeding in the wild, unless it's a really good year, maybe there's a rat plague or like long-head rat in Central Australia or something like that. Unless there's really good conditions, cats they're just not that good at breeders. They might be able to maybe a couple of kittens a year. The second conditions are good, they go nuts. Probably at 2 or 3 litters a year. I wouldn't be surprised if between at least 3 kittens per litter survive until adulthood if there's no predators going around picking them off. And then you throw into the mix towns, garbage dumps where they're just kittens can breed more. If they've got enough food almost all the year, they can just constantly pump them out. I suspect that, like, not necessarily not people's pet cats, but kind of like feral cats that hang around towns and dumps are a major reason for inflated cat densities across Australia. I don't know if cats can actually breed that well in most of Australia in normal times. I think they need really good conditions to go nuts. And but that's what I want to research in the future. I just know that too, particularly around Roxby Downs, arid recovery, the number of cats that come out of the township and the mine is just huge numbers of cats that are almost always breeding. And even a drought, they're still even breeding during drought years. And I wouldn't be surprised if that is part of the reason that cats have taken over Australia so well, is being able to take advantage of human settlements and the food associated there. I always have a daydream that if you just got a Australia where you could pit cats and quolls against each other, like on equal footing, one patch of bush, same amount of starting population of cats and quolls, and especially in Australia, the droughts and the boom and bust years, I suspect the quolls would win in the long run, especially during droughts. I think that a lot of these feral cats, it almost acts as like just this total unfair advantage that cats have when they can breed up with towns nearby. And I suspect that's part of the reason why places like where we were in the Kimberley and Kakadu, some of these places have they're just further away from big population centres that don't have that constant breeding up in a mine or a township to then go around. But this is just future research. I'm trying a lot of anecdotes here, but I think cats have
Sorry, you go.
Oh, you go.
I was just going to say, one of the guys, Steve, who also works for Bellbird, one of his one of his sort of satirical projects is cats for quolls, and people can trade in their pet cat and get a pet quoll instead, and we'll just change them out that way.
That would be awesome.
I think I read this very briefly in your thesis, but did you look at all, or did you put some research in there about feral cats versus domestic cats in terms of their general damage done to native wildlife?
No, I kind of I compared. Someone in America had put video cameras on cats, similar to how I did it, on pet cats in America, and they found a much lower kill rate of domestic cats compared to feral cats. But it's kind of like, those domestic cats in America were only hunting for fun. They got all their food calories intake otherwise. I'd say there's, and also too, I reckon most pet cats are just terrible hunters. They've got a lot of good genes in them. There's probably some of them are good, but I don't think they compete. The hunting strategies that some feral cats can achieve is just incredible. Like I had one cat kill a snake on video camera. It killed a brown snake, and it just spent about 5 minutes just chewing the head off. So it obviously didn't ingest the poison. It knew enough to know, okay, eat the snake, just don't eat the head. And then not the same cat, but another cat in the same kind of area caught a shovel nose snake, which is not poisonous, and just slurps it down like spaghetti. So they obviously knew poisonous, non-poisonous. Waste time getting the head off this snake. Don't waste time getting the head off that one.
Yeah.
Just incredible, hunting strategies that they're able to deploy against native wildlife. But I'm sure some pet cats do it. But,
yeah, it's crazy. On your paper here, you've got you discovered on your videos, I think you had 11. Is that right? 11 different types of prey that the cats caught, including those 2 snakes. Did you have anything in your research which was a surprise to you in terms of the prey that the cats caught, or even outside of this particular research, have you come across anything that is really surprising that people wouldn't think cats would hunt?
One is here in when I put them on cats around here in the desert, caterpillars. For some reason, the cats just like a certain type of caterpillar. I've been eating a lot of that. I always had an instance where a cat was just playing with a bearded dragon, not killing it, just like it'd chase it in a very half-hearted manner, and then just like nuzzle it and just knock it, and just like pretend to bite it, but not actually bite it, and then just stay back. In the end of the day, video cameras are they're not the best way of sampling kills of animals, because you invest, I think I had 100 hours of footage from the Kimberley and 100 here, and that's not much of a life, really. Like, that's not, you're only getting a small snapshot. So what was more interesting was the way in which we'd see them doing it, the length of time they would invest to a stalk. In one case, stalking rabbits. It's hard to tell the moment that a cat, when you're watching the video camera, you're seeing underneath the chin, you're shaking a bit back and forth. After a while, you feel like you get in the mind of the cat. And so I have no evidence that the cat became aware of the prey at any given time. I just feel it. And then they slow down. They start being more considered, careful, watching, single-minded, and then they'll just move forward. And in some cases, like 45 minutes, I'll invest in a stalk. That's incredible amounts of time, just slowly, being still for maybe 10 minutes and just taking a few steps forward, getting behind the cover. And then suddenly it's all bang, pounce all over. But I was pretty surprised at just how dedicated they were, how much time they invest into understanding their prey and lining things up for successful punts. I even saw one it wasn't successful. I don't think it even got anywhere close, but it got within about 3 meters of a sparrowhawk. It was clearly stalking a sparrowhawk, and
it'd be a fair. If the sparrowhawk knew you were coming, it'd probably be a bit of a fight.
Yes.
So, moving on, I want to ask: Do you know how many, or not how many, because you wouldn't know that, but do you know of some things being looked at and researched into how to eradicate cats, like how to kill cats, or maybe not eradicate, but how to reduce the population of cats?
Yeah, so one thing here in South Australia, being developed by John Reid, who's also one of the founders of Arid Recovery, where I work at the moment, is he calls it the Felixer. So it's it's designed because one of the problems with conservation of a lot of these threatened animals is that threatened animals only exist. Well, not only, but in many cases they're far away from roads and where people can get to easily. So it's well and good to maybe drop some baits from the air, but actually have direct cat control in these locations becomes insanely costly and difficult. So he's developed it's essentially the best way to describe it, a box that if a cat walks in front of it will spray gel. And cats they spend so much time grooming, and it's a poison that's they use 1080, which is barely affects native wildlife at all. It does a bit, but mostly doesn't at a certain rate, depending on the rate. If a cat walks in front of it, spray a cat, and then hopefully it'll act as a trap that's always on in remote locations. And so I think in particularly too, when you're dealing with like let's say a rock wallaby colony, you probably get a couple of cats who learn to kill rock wallaby, learn to kill them, have some certain technique, or maybe just kill the juveniles or something.
Yeah.
And to be able to have a permanent trap functionally out in those locations to just knock them off probably won't affect the overall density in the region, but just any cat that starts to live around here and starts targeting these threatened species can be knocked off. So I think that's very promising. That's one thing I'm very, very excited about. I don't think it'll affect densities much. I mean, in a closed area where you can stop cat reinvasion, then it'll obviously it does very well. But outside of that, I'm not sure if it'll be able to kill as many to reduce densities. But should be an excellent tool. And I think even just improved fire management will probably have an incredible benefit for wildlife. Not actually directly kill, don't actually directly kill any cats at all. Oh, and the other one, sorry, I should mention, which is probably the most effective cat control in southern Australia, I reckon, is rabbit control. And so you could easily argue that the most effective cat control ever conducted in Australia was the Khaleesi virus. It never actually affected the virus itself. Never affected any cats, but rabbits were forming just a massive food source for cats, and particularly here. There's a lot of long-term data here in Roxby Downs that was collected by John Reid, and the number of it basically went from about maybe 1 cat per square kilometre to a quarter of that, and consistently low ever since. It's easily reduced. I reckon I wouldn't be surprised if there'd be 10 million more cats in Australia if it wasn't Khaleesi virus. Just removing a major food source. And so I think things like that. I'm always a big fan of things that work from the ecosystem, build the ecosystem up, not necessarily target the feral cats, because if you just go out there and kill 10 cats, there are 10 cats that may have been bred up by a nearby city that are just going to fill the gaps almost immediately. And it happens time and time again. Like heaps of cat control, very temporary benefits. And so I think anything that doesn't necessarily focus on controlling the cats so much as it does building an ecosystem up. And still, cat control is very important. Like I'd never not do it. Like it's it's the only thing standing between a lot of species and being extinct. Is solid ongoing cat control. But I'm sort of hoping that maybe some new rabbit viruses that will become a bit more effective. I'd sort of really like to, if there's any kind of way of addressing the amount of not necessarily domestic cats, but like town cats, reducing the numbers of them, I think would have incredible flow-on benefits. And
sweet. So I've got 2 more questions. Did you? I haven't told you I was going to ask you this. So, did you learn anything interesting, or have you learned anything interesting about cats, feral, domestic, or whatnot, that you think would be worth sharing that I haven't asked you about?
Yeah, I'd probably just reiterate just how, like, I think most species have their shtick, their thing that makes them them, and like a unique niche. And I think cats is just patience and learning. So they can operate, they don't necessarily operate like many other predators in this, like I think fox, you could easily make a graph. I wouldn't be surprised if foxes' impacts are density related. More foxes, the worse they are. I've got a feeling cats don't really operate like that. There's a lot of individual variation. I mean, the way one will focus on one type of prey, a nearby one will not. They can just they're almost like they individually can operate as a specialist predator, and altogether as a species operate as a generalist predator. And I think that ends up being far more damaging in many regards, because they can cats in certain areas can start to really learn landscapes, learn the weaknesses of prey, and so in the Kimberley we found they were learning how to hunt fire scarves, and even a fire scar would occur 10 kilometers away, they'd somehow learn about it and take advantage.
Yep.
Another thing we found here at arid recovery, I did some research on the cats on the boundary of arid recovery, and because inside arid recovery, fence reserve with no cats, there are heaps of small mammals. So like hopping mice, plains mice, all these lovely native mice that live in there, and because they can fit through the holes in the fence acts as like a source population. So all these animals, they're constantly feeding through the fence. And what we found after a while was the cats learnt that over time. And so they selectively hunt along the boundary of arid recovery. And there are actually a few fences in the area that they look very similar. Like we got the dog fence nearby. It looks very similar, but it doesn't have small mammals on the other side. And cats know the difference. They don't. So they not only are able to work out that fences, small mammals come through these fences all the time, let's hunt along these fences. They also know the difference between, okay, this fence is not any good. In a very short amount of time, they can just take advantage. They watch, learn, and take advantage of any weakness. And then the other story I've heard was someone watching a cat. There's sugar gliders in the backyard, and that every night, sugar gliders have a real routine. They'll climb a tree, fly down to the next tree, go up that one, fly down another one. They'll often do the same routine again and again. Their cat was just sitting out the front, just watching this routine. A couple of nights, chose the location where they'd typically fly quite low to the ground, waited there, sugar glider came down, grabbed it. It just watches routines, learns, and goes that way. And so that's probably the main thing I'm learning about feral cats is just they don't operate like a classic species. They are bringing evolutionary weapons to Australia that most other animals I don't think have much. They haven't had to deal with before. They haven't defended against in this regard.
Yeah. So I said I only had one more question, but I have two now. Talking about cats and their ability to learn, do we have any estimate on the average lifespan of a feral cat? Like, obviously, the older you are, the more you've learnt, the better you are at killing things. How old do they usually live? Do we know?
No, well, I've got there's a student who is researching that at the moment. No. At a guess, I'm going to say around 5, like up to 10 years, but probably 3 to 5 is probably an average. And that's just a guess. Hopefully more research will come into that soon. You do get some really, really old cats, and a lot of them die young as well. So I'd say, the possible lifespans would be no different from a pet cat. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if there's a whole heap of 15-year-old feral cats gnarly old feral cats out there. Yeah. But I think I think there's probably a lot of mortality of cats out there as well.
Yeah, sure.
The average is much lower.
Yeah. So this is my last question for you, and we haven't talked really about birding at all. You did mention that you were a little bit birder, but can you hear my kids screaming in the background or not?
I can, yeah.
They've been gone for a while. No. Anyway, so yes, we haven't talked much about birding, but one thing that I ask everyone who comes on the show is, what is your favourite birding location in Australia? So that's my question.
If you have one. Easily be Mornington Wildlife Sanctuary, where I did my PhD research. It was just it had that boundary between a lot of the higher rainfall tropical species in the area, but then also a lot of really arid seeming spinifex. I think a lot of the area seemed just like not too different from Alice Springs in some regards, but then you could have monsoon sort of style rivers. So it's just this wonderful boundary, just little bits of everything. Yeah. And it's also where I had the most fun birding, because there's just so many birders there as well. And it was a bit of a communal thing. In the desert where I am now, I hate to say, there's just not much. There's like there's not much diversity. There's not much. I'm more of a mammal person here, I guess. Like,
Yeah.
there's some, but definitely Mornington.
Yeah,
my sanctuary. But,
Well, thanks for giving us. I don't even know what time we started, but be over an hour. Thanks for giving us an hour of your time, Hugh, and
no worries.
all the best with your continued research. And we'll keep an eye on what's happening in the world of feral cats.
No worries. Yeah, thanks for having me.